Executive Chairman of Maritime Safety Authority of Fiji, Mr. David Koletagane, Director Hydrographic Services, Commander Gerard Rokua, Managing Directors of shipping companies, logistic companies, and our private sector, maritime stakeholders, and as David had noted, our students and teachers, welcome to you all. Ladies and gentlemen, Bula Vinaka, very good morning to you. I'm delighted to join you to celebrate World Maritime Day 2022. I think all that needed to be said was said by the good Reverend and David, the Executive Chair of MSEF. So I don't need to say much, but to reiterate some of the key messages. Firstly, to note what the MC had said, that in the last 2 years, our celebrations were limited due to the pandemic. And as you would recall, last year we had virtual celebrations. But today we are in a much better place. And thanks to the efforts of all of you. And like every crisis, we were presented with challenges, but we were presented with opportunities as well. Opportunities to transition our sectors and our economy to the next stage of development and resilience. Ladies and gentlemen, just 2 days ago, we celebrated World Tourism Day, and the theme was Rethinking Tourism. In those celebrations, we acknowledge the role the maritime sector plays in tourism. Not only does the sector connect tourists across our islands, it is a critical link for trade, for fuel, and for basic supplies. Maritime stakeholders are also our ambassadors for tourism, ensuring that Fiji, as our brand reflects, is truly a place for where happiness finds you. The happy faces here reflects this spirit. So just as we have to rethink the future of our tourism industry, it is equally important to rethink the maritime sector, the sector that is so intricately linked not only to tourism, but it's linked to trade, it is linked to health, it is linked to fisheries, and many other sectors. It is linked to connectivity. So in terms of the value of the sector, over 80% of world trade is transported by international shipping. In Fiji, this percentage is even higher. Shipping played an important role during the pandemic and world over. Fiji was no different. At that time when most of the world was shut, the maritime sector stood strong and took on a greater role. International airports were closed, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, but our seaports kept operating. Fijians and the Fijian economy were sustained by the essential medicine, goods, food, fuel coming from overseas through ships. We kept our islands and Fijians connected, supplying essential goods and transporting people back to their home in the islands. Although there were international disruptions, we kept trading, and not a day was lost. We took Fijian-made, Fijian-grown products to our export markets and maintaining a presence in this market, which was so critical for our economy. We even welcomed tourists by sea when the global tourism was shut. So looking ahead, ladies and gentlemen, the global shipping emissions, as the chair noted, are responsible for roughly 3% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. And this is growing. So it's 3%, but it is growing. So there is an urgency to act now. We as a nation, as David had noted, contribute very small amount of greenhouse gas emissions, 0.006, which is very small. But as was noted, we have never shied away from taking a leadership role and taking decisive steps. We have made a global commitment of net zero carbon emissions by 2050 under the Paris Agreement. Nationally, we have legislated this commitment through the Climate Change Act of 2021. We have also pledged to reduce our shipping emissions by 40% in 2030, and that is not too far away. We are now in a decade of action, This year's World Maritime Day theme says new technology for greater shipping is extremely important, as the speakers have noted, if we are to pivot to carbon neutrality. Ladies and gentlemen, the question is how to go about this transition together. To meet the demand of greener transition in the maritime sector, particularly in small island developing states like Fiji, inclusive innovation must be encouraged and new technologies must be welcomed and adopted, technologies that are appropriate for us. So, ladies and gentlemen, in an effort to address the impacts of climate change on small island developing states, the International Maritime Organization, IMO, as you'd hear from, adopted an initial strategy to reduce GHG emissions, greenhouse gas emissions from our ships, with a vision which aims to phase them out as soon as possible in this century. The strategy envisages a vast reduction in carbon intensity in international and domestic shipping and sets a pathway for carbon dioxide emission reduction consistent with the International Paris Agreement. So, as you'd note, ladies and gentlemen, these are big goals. And at the end of the day, it requires cooperation from everyone, particularly our partners. It requires technology as well, resources as well as an enabler. An enabler, or these resources and these technical sort of resources needs to help us make that transition, but it also needs to protect our pristine and fragile ecosystems as well. You'd know ships in the past, and some shipbuilders are here, were built not to work on clean and green fuel. I mean, it was not a consideration back then. But now we need clean vessels and technology. This also presents a challenge and opportunity. A lot of corporations, private sector, and governments are now looking at retrofit solutions, including Fiji. By retrofitting vessels, we have the flexibility to tailor existing vessels to meet the latest global emission standards. Large part of retrofitting requires innovative modifications, small modifications that allow for energy efficiency at a fraction of the cost, because you do not have to change the boat. You do not have to change your fleet. We do not have those resources or expertise, nor deep pockets for large-scale investments to change our entire domestic fleet. And I'm sure all of you would agree with me. That's where this partnership is key. And to illustrate this partnership, we are working very closely with our partners. One in particular, Global Maritime Technology Cooperation Center, MTCC network in Pacific, in the installation of propeller Boscat fins. These are small devices, energy-saving devices attached to the propeller of the vessel that make propulsion more efficient and less fuel-consuming. We intend to install them, ladies and gentlemen, on all government vessels. And another example is earlier this year, MTCC Pacific handed over this retrofitted vessel to a community, Nawakalewada Village Women's Group. And we are looking forward to all the data coming out of that project. Ladies and gentlemen, with these initiatives in green shipping, we ask the question, what does it mean for all of you, the seafarers, the captains, the engineers? In my view, what it means is that relying on fossil fuel is no longer the future of shipping. The future is newer technology, cleaner fuel, and at some point in time in the future, no fossil fuel at all. It means developing capabilities in new technology and continuously upskilling to make that transition, to make that shift. We need local talent, all of you, ladies and gentlemen, to be involved. We need to build our human capabilities to allow sustainability of these initiatives. So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, we as a nation have set ourselves target, led by our Honorable Prime Minister, who made it very clear that we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions from the shipping sector. We have only 8 more years to reduce our shipping emissions by 40%. And like I said, that's not a long time. For Fiji to transition into climate resilient economy, we need to mobilize all our resources and expertise. We need to address barriers such as skills and technology adaptation. Transformative change can only be realized through accelerated, scalable finance initiatives. And we can only do this through collaboration and partnership with our partners. More importantly, these global and national goals should not be only government's goals or the shipping sector's goals, but owned by each and every one of us, because it is a collective effort. So I ask that we consider these goals, these immediate solutions, these long-term solutions as stepping stones between now and 2030 and 2050 and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, they say that every ship needs a captain, but we all know it needs a crew to make it sail. The world owes every woman and every man in the maritime sector, even those offshore, a great deal of gratitude. Whether you're a captain, deckhand, port agent, cook, engineer, painter, you have kept our connectivity, our lifeblood, our supply chains working. And you continue to do so in the face of another global crisis, which is climate change. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart. With those few words, I thank everyone for joining us today and wish you a happy World Maritime Day. Nakavakalek.